Welcome back to Questions for Corbett, ladies and gentlemen. I'm James Corbett of corbettreport.com, and this week on the D program, we have a very simple and straightforward question coming from a listener named John, who writes, why, when I search for Terence Yakey on Wikipedia, does the search yield no results? Is it possible that Wikipedia is also part of the problem? Thank you for the question, John. It is good sometimes to get a softball straight down the middle, right over the plate. So let's see how far we can knock this one out of the park. To answer your question very simply and very directly, yes, Wikipedia is part of the problem, or at the very least, people's unthinking reliance on Wikipedia is a large part of the problem. Something that I think will not be news to a lot of my listeners, but let's not make an ass out of you and me and assume anything here. We're all at different levels of understanding, so let's put some of this out on the table and make it explicit. And perhaps no better place to do so than by engaging in this little exercise that John has put forward here. Go to Wikipedia, type in Terence Yakey, make sure you spell it correctly, and you will note, yes, no, there is no Wikipedia entry for a Terence Yakey. Do you mean Terence Yeager? No, I mean Terence Yakey. You know, the cop that was involved in the rescue operation at the OKC bombing site and was decorated for his heroism that day, and who intimated he had information that would blow the lid off of the official story of the OKC bombing, and ended up dying in, well, beyond suspicious circumstances. If you don't know that story, I would suggest you not type Terence Yakey into the Wikipedia search bar, but go to corbettreport.com and type in Terence Yakey, and you'll find episode 140 of the Corbett Report on Requiem for the Suicided Terence Yakey. But just apropos of this story, that does raise the question of Wikipedia, and who gets to even determine what is worthy of an entry and what isn't, and then, let alone, further down the road, well, then what information gets included if and when something is deemed worthy of a Wikipedia entry. These are not academic or rhetorical questions. These are very real questions that have very real consequences. And this is the type of thing that I have mentioned quite explicitly in the past. For example, most notably back in Corbett Report Radio episode 220 on the Bastion of Truthiness. You might have heard me refer to Wikipedia in the past as the Bastion of Truthiness. Well, I went in depth about what that means and why I say that, and what are the real philosophical implications even of something like Wikipedia. But all of that exploration was 8 years ago now. That was back in 2012, so a lot of water has flown under that bridge by now, and things have progressed even further. I do suggest that you go back and listen or re-listen to Corbett Report Radio 220, but we need to collect more information on the Wikipedia phenomenon as it's played out over the past 8 years, because as I mentioned last year in my video on We Need to Talk About Search, in the future, we are not going to have the desktop computer devices that we have today in order to control what it is that we're searching and how we come across information. It's all going to be these devices that are listening to what we're saying and will search Wikipedia for the answer to what happened on 9/11 or any other sort of controversial thing. They will give you the one Wikipedia answer for what happened. That's why these types of sites like Wikipedia that seek to become the centralization of all human knowledge, well, certainly they can be manipulated, can't they? And if they can, you can better believe they are being manipulated. And I'm not talking out my rear end here. There is real documentable evidence of that. I think my first flags about Wikipedia were raised at my first encounter with it, really, because I do recall vividly back in the early 2000s, I was working a job at a publishing company in Calgary where they were publishing, if not school textbooks, but mostly school resource books, kinds of things, the things that you'd find in the school library. And as part of one of my duties there for the few months that I was working there before I quit, because my boss was absolutely crazy, but one of my jobs was as a fact checker, because everything that went in every one of the books had to have at least, I think it was 3 sources to verify each and every one of the facts that were cited in the book. And acceptable sources included at that time things like Encarta. Yes, we had Encarta on the old CD-ROM, and it was useless and horrible, and it was a terrible tool, but it was one of the acceptable sources. But I did notice at that time, it was early 2000s, and I remember vividly, I would search for various things, topics, dates, names, events on Google, of course, because what else do you search? This was well before the Corbett Report, well before I got into any of this conspiratorial research. And I remember every time I would search for almost anything, the very first link that Google would provide would be a Wikipedia link. And this was, it really went from me not having ever seen or heard of Wikipedia to it being the number one result on everything I was searching at the flip of a switch. And even in my pre-Corbett Report mindset, I wasn't particularly conspiratorial, I wasn't thinking along these lines, but even at that time, it immediately triggered some sort of flag for me. How does that happen unless this site is being promoted in some way? And why would it be promoted? Well, precisely because it has been set up to be this central trough of information which everyone will go through, and everyone, of course, sees Wikipedia as one of the first search results on almost anything that you search. So, what specifically can we say about Wikipedia and what it has been involved with, what it has done over the years? Well, a very informative article that was recently reposted onto offguardian.org from the Swiss propaganda research website is Wikipedia a disinformation operation, ? Which has a lot of information, background information, and links to problematic information when it comes to Wikipedia's how Wikipedia functions and who is really using it. For example, we can point to this 2007 article from Rothschild Reuters, CIA, FBI computers used for Wikipedia edits. You don't say. Or The Atlantic back in 2015 was reporting on the covert world of people trying to edit Wikipedia for pay, talking about some of the corporatocracy's use of editing of Wikipedia for their own gains. There's stories like, I hope people follow the blog of Craig Murray, of course, the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, who's done great work on a number of subjects over the years. I've cited him, for example, in his work on the Skripal affair. And he has an incredibly interesting series of posts on the Philip Cross affair, referring to one Wikipedia editor who has made over 30 edits per day, 7 days a week, without a single day off in, I think, 5 consecutive years of editing. Every single day, 7 days a week, over the course of 8 or so hours per day, every single day for 5 years. It's more than a full-time job that this Philip Cross pseudonym has been used to edit thousands upon thousands of Wikipedia entries. It's absolutely insane. And the more that you go into this Philip Cross pseudonym and its connections, it's quite the rabbit hole. So I will throw the links into Craig Murray's work on that. Another thing that the Swiss propaganda research website has pointed out, ruling in German Wikipedia trial, where they found that a Wikipedia author that is particularly prolific in German Wikipedia, one of the most prolific German Wikipedia editors, under the pseudonym of Felix, turned out to be a former functionary of the pro-Israel wing of the German Left Party and a former foreign member of the Israeli army with special insignia of the U.S. Army and other armed forces. Again, I think you get the idea of how Wikipedia and its pseudonymous editing structure can be abused. It could be abused by various governments, corporations, intelligence agencies, and oh yeah, by the way, time and time and time again has been exposed for being used in precisely that manner. So that is one aspect of this operation and why you should not simply blindly trust whatever Wikipedia is saying about any given subject. And as I say, it is certainly interesting that Wikipedia has obviously been pushed as the source, the definitive source for information about any number of given subjects. One example of which, actually, also recently coming up in Off Guardian, was a look at the Spanish flu death rate numbers, which have been edited in the course of this coronavirus panic. They have been edited to reflect a dramatic drop in the estimate of the death rate from the 1918 Spanish flu. Why is that suddenly being edited down. There's an interesting post up on Off Guardian that I'll link to, Wikipedia slashes Spanish flu death rate, which goes into great detail about that and its consequences, but again gives you another example of how Wikipedia and controlling the Wikipedia version of history is becoming, to a certain extent, like working at the Ministry of Truth in Orwell's 1984, and having real control over people's perception of the world, which manifests as real control over the world itself. If you control the way people see and understand history and what they believe, then you control them at a very deep level. Some very important thoughts that this raises. And this is not, of course, to say that Wikipedia cannot be used as a tool for research. I do use Wikipedia as a tool for research at times, but of course it's not simply to read what it says in Wikipedia and then blindly believe it. No, of course not. It can be useful at times, at the very least, on controversial areas, at the very least, to get references for specific things that are being touted in the official narrative so that you can see where they derive from and better pick them apart. That can be useful as well. So I would never, ever suggest using Wikipedia articles as evidence of anything, but going down to the reference section and finding the original references for things can be useful. But we always have to be aware, and it's difficult because as human beings, we are only aware of what is in front of us, what we are being shown. But what are we not being shown? Things like Terence Yakey. What does that tell us about the world that Wikipedia wants us to see and doesn't want us to see? So, long way of answering, but very specifically, yes, Wikipedia is part of the problem, and I hope my audience has a better understanding of that than most, but if not, please do check into the links and references I'm providing. Let me also use this as an opportunity to call on the members of the Corbett Report community to participate in an open source investigation, because I know over the years and years and years that I've been doing this, I've seen dozens and dozens of stories along the lines of this. The CIA and FBI caught editing their own Wikipedia entries and things like that. There's been so many different stories like that. If you happen to know of a specific example of that, please do log into corbettreport.com. Leave that in the comment section. Perhaps we can collect this and make it into an article or a podcast and really synthesize this material in a more thoroughgoing manner. But at the very least, I hope this broaches the topic in a way that answers your question, John. Thank you for that question. I'm looking forward to answering another question next week. In the meantime, of course, a lot of information coming out through the corbettreport.com website on a daily basis. I hope you'll be there to join me for it. James Corbett, corbettreport.com.